place match, but on to this one. This is what's on the chopping block, and one of these players got to drop down in the bracket to face the Veets, and one of them's going on to face Life Coach. So no matter what, you're going to have 2 Nylum players in the finals and a potential 1 through 3rd place finish for Nylum in this event, which would be just an absolute dominant performance. And in this one in particular, RDU's coming into this with Hunter, Mage, Rogue, and his 4th deck submitted is Druid for this event. So he actually didn't have Druid in his main lineup going into it, and Lothar's got Mage, Druid, Rogue, and he submit Hunter coming into it. So this is actually a mirror match now in a best of 7.
Yeah, so it's essentially going to be what player can get the best matchups for his decks and what player can play the best. Kind of like and there's kind of a bit of luck involved, but also it's going to be a very skilled game. There could also be differences between what type of mages or what type of, or sorry, not what type of mages, because both players are bringing mech mage, but what type of hunters each player is bringing. And if one player is bringing face hunter and the other is bringing mid-range hunter, that could be a slight difference in the lineups, even though they are running the same classes.
Yeah, as well as the druids can be different too. And I'm curious how much these players practicing with each other and knowing each other is going to affect the way that they actually approach these games too. So it's going to be hunter for Lothar, and we have seen now this is a face hunter deck. We saw Wolf Rider in the opening hand, so we know that this is going to be a very aggressive oriented strategy, and RD is going to be coming with a traditional mech mage deck. Nothing too crazy going on. It's basically everything you've seen so far. I would expect this to very close to mirror everything we saw from Life Coach. It seems to me like just the mech decks have been very, very consistent throughout their builds. Like just such a strong builds have already been found for them.
As we alluded to before, RDU actually is running a mid-range hunter deck, so there actually is a very slight difference between their lineups, where Lothar opts to favor the phase hunter. And at least in this matchup, I think the phase hunter will have a pretty decent advantage if the Annoyatrons aren't drawn late into the game.
Yep.
That being said, though, there's a pretty good start from the mech mage, but there's also Knife Juggler in the hunter's hands.
Yep, I think this is going to be a major turn for Lothar to really have a chance to pull ahead here. This Knife Juggler and this Haunted Creeper could really get some work done. But there is some sort of fear to it. Like if those juggles fail, then his Knife Juggler is going to get contested directly. So he's going to opt for the safe play and just put his Eaglehorn Bow into this this Mech Warper. And he's going to force his opponent to have another mech here. Also, lest Cogmaster only deal 1 point of damage. And right now, RDU doesn't have another mech. So unless he picks one up, it's a Cogmaster instead. So no action for RDU really, other than just a Hero Power and another Cogmaster. So some potential for damage coming up next turn. He's got Mechanical Yeti, so 6 points of power effectively on the board on his next attack. But is Lothar going to continue to disrupt this? As he put Eaglehorn Bow into another Mech Warper here? And then how does he develop afterwards? I think I'd like to see him go Knife Juggler and Mad Scientist.
He could also be thinking of the Knife Juggler Unleash the Hounds is so relevant in this matchup, and that could be a reason why he didn't play it the previous turn, other than the fact that it wouldn't have been on curve. But judging from the fact that he chose to save the Knife Juggler on his previous turn, I think there might be a possibility where he's just saying the Knife Juggler is so relevant with the Unleash the Hounds and then in my next turn 5, that's almost certainly what I'm going to play. And it's almost certainly going to turn the game around.
Yeah. Again, this is like a more aggressive-oriented strategy. So the fact that Lothar's having to fight for the board so early on could spell a little bit of trouble for him. He's not going to have the same kind of power draws that we saw from RDU's deck yesterday, where he had Savannah Highmanes, he had Dr. Boom, he even had Ragnaros in his deck. Lothar's going to be curving relatively lower. Like these 3 drops that you see in his hand are basically going to be the top end of his curve.
Now, usually with the Phase Hunter, there are only explosive traps used, and normally these are kind of more offensive tools just to get the extra 2 damage in. But against aggro decks like Mech Mage, it can actually be a very good defensive tool. Unfortunately, Lothar draws his first explosive trap now, but I'm almost certain he runs 2. He might be thinking that he needs to run his Mad Scientist in as quickly as possible into one of these minions, because if he doesn't, and he draws the second explosive trap, then this Mad Scientist will just be a vanilla 2/2.
Yeah, I'd like to see Mad Scientist run into this Mechanical Yeti, an Eaglehorn Bow come down, goes damage to the face, and Hero Power. He's got to get the ball rolling on some of this damage, and I think he can trade a little bit more life to try to make up the position on the board that he's kind of been having to fight for the entire tournament long. And since this is his second Eaglehorn Bow, and he does have the other explosive trap in his hand, there's likelihood to get a lot of mileage out of that Eaglehorn Bow. So that's what I'd like to see him do. As well as the fact that since he's drawn this other explosive trap, rather than set it and let his Mad Scientist die and not get another explosive trap, I'd like to see him use it now.
I have to say, Lothar has drawn fairly well for the beginning few turns. He hasn't really drawn his Wolf Riders or Arcane Golems, which are just generally the finishers you want to use in this deck. He's drawn a lot of the board control minions instead with the Knife Juggler, Haunted Creeper, Unleash the Hounds, and both bows. So it's turning out fairly well for Lothar at this point.
Well played.
Whoa, it's a misdirection instead. So 3 damage. Gonna go to RDU's face. Wow, that could have been a blow. We haven't seen misdirection in 8. That's the first time I've seen misdirection, I think, since Fight Night.
Wow. Like, misdirection is not a card anyone uses these days, and we've seen Lothar just putting in these random secrets just to throw his opponent off. We saw a counterspell in Lothar's Mech Mage, and now we see misdirection. And at least on this turn, it's getting a lot of work in.
Well, it is getting a lot of work in, but now look how much damage he's facing down, sort of as a result of this not being an explosive trap. Like, he would have had a second explosive trap to follow this, and he'd only be facing down 4 points of damage instead of facing down potentially 11 if he doesn't get the right sequence of cards in here.
Yeah, fortunately for him, he does have a really nice comeback mechanic in the Knife Juggler Unleash the Hounds. If the juggles are true, then he'll be able to send him a lot of hounds and maybe even direct some of them to face. The hounds are especially good in this matchup because Mech Mage typically doesn't have a lot of board clears, and even if they do, even if they draw their pretty much only board clear, which is the Goblin Mask Mage, you have to have a mech on the field as well. RDU doesn't have a mech right now, so
Wow.
he needs the exact combination of a low-cost mech plus the Goblin Mask Mage to effectively deal with this board.
Those are some solid juggles that he got there.
Even a great spare part to go along with it, just
Yep.
to fill out his mana curve. Just so perfect for Lothar.
I believe this is probably going to be Finicky Cloak Field on this Mech Warper. It could be an armor plating, though. I think I actually like armor plating more because you do need your opponent to attack this Mech Warper, but you need them to not be able to attack it efficiently. Oregon Infiltrator gets drawn. You would have liked to see that turn 1, I think, but
At this point, though, how relevant is the Mech Warper? Because we've seen a lot of mechs already used on the table. So,
well, if he gets a Huffer, I don't think it's nearly as relevant. That's for sure.
so let's count the damage right now.
Well, yeah, that's 10, 12, 14. Looks like he's got 16 points of damage available.
So 1 to face. I think that's
Yep.
lethal, actually.
4, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Nope, he's 1 damage off lethal right now, but RDU is... now that he's put himself in this position, Lothar would actually die to Fireball. So he does, unless I'm just doing my math completely wrong, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He's got 15 points of damage.
Okay.
So he actually would die to Fireball in this position. So I think he's going to consider trading something for sure. And when he does this, he doesn't die to Fireball and Frostbolt, but he does die to like Fireball, Frostbolt, and Whirling Blades if he doesn't clear out this small guy either. So I think that there's a chance that he clears this, but I would believe he's going to tend to favor face damage, but you can see him really heavily considering taking this out, and I actually would like to see him do it. He's got more than enough damage, I think, to end this game as it's panning out. But he will have lethal next turn if he puts his pressure on in RDU's and everything. He also knows there's 3 cogs in RDU's hand. So, yeah, just going to take the safe play, and I would tend to agree here. He's still got plenty of damage to work with. Not really a big deal. Lothar, I mean, this is 8 points of damage right here. And then a 9th points of damage available either with his explosive trap or with potentially, I mean, probably close to half the draws in his deck.
RDU just smiling right now, knowing he can't do anything.
Yep. You just got to drop Dr. Boom and hope for the best. So Lothar having a chance to draw lethal here. And Ironbeak Owl not going to do it quite yet unless his juggle goes to face. And he's going to want to put this damage in before he plays that Ironbeak Owl in case a juggle hits a Boombot.
This is actually a really key spare part from Lothar right now. The freezing effect will allow a lot of things to not be lethal.
Yeah, so RD is going to have to quite literally draw something like Keys In Mystic or or I don't really know how he gets out of this one. This is looking pretty brutal. So Frostbolt, if he rolls 2 4s on Boombots, it's 8, 9, 10, 11. That's only 12 damage. He would still be 1 off, even if he got perfect Boombot rolls to the face, and he cannot attack into it because he's got to be aware it's explosive trap. And he would need the damage from Boombots anyway, so it looks like it's just going to end up being game 1 over the Lothar.
You say he has to know it's explosive trap, but he could be thinking that Lothar might be actually running a second misdirection in his deck. That's definitely an actual consideration right now.
Yeah. With the freezing spare part, actually, with the way that this freezing spare part was played, I think there's a good chance that it is something like misdirection.
So RDU is actually trying to go for it.
Not going to be it this time.
Yeah, he frost. At this point, frostbolting yourself is an equally great play, but no, he goes for. He doesn't even ping himself. He lets his teammate get the honorable kill.
Like maybe he'll forget to hero power. No, we didn't forget. Game 1 over to Lothar. Very quick opener from him, but really, it's sort of a surprising event from this was that he was able to get board control so early with Face Hunter. He just had every tool he needed to disrupt what was happening, and then it just, once it hit a point where he basically had critical mass, he just turned on the heat and ignored everything on the board and just went for Face instead, except for the one turn where he had to split some of his damage and put it into Mechanical Yeti to play around a portion of range from RDU, which I actually like that he did. Even though RDU didn't have it, it's like quite literally one of the only ways he was going to lose was something like a lot of burn from RDU's hand. So there's no reason not to play around it when you otherwise would have a stranglehold on the game.
Yeah, I just also want to point out how much that misdirection actually affected the outcome of the game. Misdirection not only gave a buff to the bow, but also was essentially a 6-point swing in the game. It prevented 3 damage to his face and went for 3 damage onto RDU. And I have to think that that misdirection kind of flustered RDU for the rest of the game. He's seen a lot of Lothar's decks, and he knows that he likes to throw in all these random things like counterspell as a secret, like misdirection as a secret. And going forward, he has to play around a lot of cards that you don't normally have to play around against most professional players.
Yeah. You know, I was going to say that I thought Lothar changing up his look for today. Yesterday we saw him sporting a cowboy hat and a tank tee. I thought it might have put him at a disadvantage not having access to that today, but man, he came correct in game 1. That was a pretty convincing victory.
Yeah, convincing indeed. I mean, Face Hunter, it is Lothar's 4th deck. He did not bring the Face Hunter deck to previous days of the tournament, so he has to be thinking it is probably his weakest deck that he didn't bring before. So getting that out of the way is just an excellent strategy. We saw in the first match of the day between Savitz and Life Coach. Savitz brought his 4th deck, his warrior, to the first game of the match, and Life Coach brought his 4th deck, the druid, into the first game of the match. And I think it's all about just getting that first quote-unquote weak deck out of the way and having confidence to go through the rest of the series with your quote-unquote 3 better decks.
Yeah, not only that, but if you win that game, it also is a little bit of a confidence blow to your opponent because they brought their 4th deck and they've already lost the game with it. They're like, maybe I chose the wrong deck for this. And we haven't seen anyone follow through playing their 4th deck in the second game either. So maybe that trend will continue here. It's going to be Rogue versus Druid, and I think RDU is a little bit unhappy with this matchup. I would say that traditionally Rogue has a little bit of an advantage here because of the blowout turns it has available with things like Swipe and Tinker Sharp Soda Oil with Blade Flurry.
Yeah, that being said, I believe in previous iterations of this matchup in this tournament, Druid has had generally favorable results getting that wild growth early and just shutting the rogue out of a lot of turns.
Yeah, having wild growth early is going to give you access to Swipe on turn 5 and a hero power to clear out Violet Teacher shenanigans. So when you don't have wild growth or you don't have Innervate for something like that, I think that the rogue player often pulls away with the game. But that being said, they have to draw Violet Teacher first and they have to have the tools to go along with it. So preparation, also an important card, and Lothar really mulling over this hand. I think I'd like to see him keep Violet Teacher since he has the coin, but I don't think either of these Earth Ring Farseers belong in this hand right now.
I think the Earthring Farseer, at least one, is a potential keep because if you play the Earthring Farseer on turn 3, it kind of disrupts your opponent's turn slightly, and you don't really want to play nothing on turn 3. So Earthring Farseer, I think, is an okay keep.
Wow, he's going to actually keep Lothar along with that also, and he gets replaced with Azure Drake. So very little spell interaction going on with Lothar's hand right now, but a lot of potential for this to be big. And Lothar pretty happy to see no wild growth. And RD, of course, not happy to see it. Picks up a second Eviscerate. And this hand, I still am not convinced about this Earthring Farseer keep. Honestly, I think it's okay, but I would like to see him, when he's got Violet Teacher, I would like to see him fish for something like Preparation. When he doesn't have Violet Teacher, I think it's fine to keep Earthring Farseer, because then you do need a drop. But when you have the Violet Teacher, you have almost a guaranteed drop.
Yeah, that friendly BM a bit between teammates, a natural mistake each time you don't get wild growth or you don't curve out.
Yeah.
I think the Earthling Farseer is actually going to kind of pay off here because it's going to directly contest the piloted shredder from the Druid.
The other thing too is he drew a preparation anyway, so it's going to be a big payoff and chances for some shenanigans this turn. I mean, this is a really big one. Here's a question for you: do you ever run this Earthling Farseer in first?
I think it's a lot about what you expect to come out of the piloted shredder, and I think the worst case scenario is probably it's probably the Millhouse Mana Storm, and in that case, it's still probably better to just go for the Eviscerate first.
Well, the worst case scenario is he plays Violet Teacher, he preps an Eviscerate, and then a Doomsayer pops out.
That's true.
That's the worst case scenario. That would just be an absolute nightmare for him. Or even if like an Explosive Sheep came out of it. So, but at the same time, though, if he chooses to attack this first and something like Mana Wraith pops out, he gets punished for it equally. I think he's going to take the safe route because Doomsayer is just such a blowout versus what's happening. And now that he's seen this, I think he's more comfortable potentially even taking other lines. Like I could see Lothar, I can see Azure Drake, or Edwin Van Cleef being a reasonable play here.
Yeah, I like the Violet Teacher a bit. He doesn't even prep anything.
Yeah, I think Violet Teacher's just fine too. I mean, there's not a big threat. Look, Wild Growth's just in time.
Yeah, just essentially taunting him. Turn 5, Wild Growth, one of the worst turns to draw it.
I actually think you're going to see Wild Growth in Savage Roar here. He needs to take care of this Violet Teacher. He wants to start scaling into a 7 in his 8 drop. You see he's got Ragnaros in his hand, which is actually, I think, a really key card in this matchup. So that's exactly what he's going to do. So Piloted Shredder, this is a pretty even trade, all things considered. The big difference is that RDU has yielded initiative to Lothar going into his 5-mana turn, and that's exactly where he wants to be. Azure Drake's going to be one of his absolute best drops on an empty board on this turn.
Yeah, I kind of like Azure Drake here. Actually, you know what? Lothar actually isn't bad either. You really want to contest the Ancient of Lore coming down on turn 7.
Well, mind you,
I think Azure Drake does the same thing with an Eviscerate.
Right. I'd like to see him hang on to this Lothar for one more turn and see what's going on. But in this position, though, this says also, yeah, I don't like this nearly as much because if he'd played Azure Drake last turn, this turn going into it, like take a look at what his draw would have. So his draw would have been Sprint. So he could have potentially prep sprinted this turn and then Eviscerated. And now he's going to have to use his coin instead. And when he uses his coin, he's not going to get an extra Edwin buff from it. And at this point, you can get your 6/6 Edwin out. He would have effectively been, I think, in the exact same scenario. I think this is... I don't think at the end of the day it matters too much because the board would have looked very similar, but I think his sequencing is probably a little bit superior when he plays Azure Drake on 5.
I would have to think this turn is going to be a Ragnaros turn. There's just so many things that you can hit really effectively.
Yeah.
Double Swipe is also a possibility, though.
Yeah, I like Double Swipe a lot, and I like Ragnaros a lot. Ragnaros, I think, is a little bit more risky because the Azure Drake's on the board. If you didn't see Azure Drake, I think Ragnaros would just be a pretty easy turn, but he's also facing down a bunch of damage, so he has to consider like how much Tinker's Sharpsword Oil ends up hurting him, how much a big Blade Flurry on top of that could hurt him, and this is more of a safer play, and Ragnaros can steal back initiative, so I think I'm happier to see him do it this way. This is going to be a big Edwin Van Cleef here too, so again, really the sequencing not mattering too much because of the way the cards panned out, and Prep Sprint into Edwin Van Cleef is not a bad one.
Yeah, especially when you get it exactly to a 6/6 Van Cleef, which basically necessitates a Keeper of the Grove from your opponent. Or a Ragnaros to answer.
Yeah. RDU's been playing a lot of Ragnaros. This is something we haven't seen a lot of other players been doing. And this is an important shot. He needs this to hit this Van Cleef. Otherwise, he's going to fall very far behind on board. So Senor del Fuego, an important hit right now for RDU. And he picks up Edwin Van Cleef with it. That is a major swing in this game right now. RDU has answers for it. I'm sorry, Lothar has answers for this Ragnaros, but again, that value was something RDU needed to stay in this game.
Yeah, Rogue is a deck that doesn't run BGH, so he'll actually have to deal with this Ragnaros just basically the old-fashioned way, putting damage into it. And every point of damage you put into the Ragnaros is one less damage that you put into the opponent's face.
Yep. So I don't think he has to play. He doesn't have to play Blood Mage here. Actually, he can just backstab, Eviscerate, and SI this, and then he gets to weave in a Shiv as well and keep his dagger fresh. But I can see the merits of playing Blood Mage right now, because you might want to hold on to some of these cards.
I'm thinking, is there a way to develop both SI agents?
Yeah,
And
you definitely could.
You could, but you would waste 2 damage to the face. But I think developing minions on the board in this matchup is generally just pretty good. So he's going to go with the developing the Blood Mage instead.
This guy's toast.
SI.
SI is going to take 8 damage. Oh my gosh.
That looks like it.
Wow, that's a lot to pay to get that other SI7 agent on board. We're gonna have to see if this is worth it, but that's a lot of damage from that Ragnar. I mean, that Ragnaros pulled in 14 effective damage now.
Yeah, I guess with this play, it kind of goes in the in my direction, but kind of over what I was expecting. I was thinking of maybe 2 SI agents or an SI plus a Blood Mage Thanos, but we see Lothar really valuing that extra board presence on the board. And with this play, at least, he'll guarantee a Tinker Sharpshooter Oil target if he draws it for the next turn.
I'm a little bit surprised that RDU chose to play Sylvanas here over the Druid of the Claw. But this Druid of the Claw, this Sylvanas is going to... it is going to require getting sapped or dealt with in some fashion. I mean, he's threatening lethal very heavily with this Sylvanas right now, with Force of Nature Savage Roar. Always something that you have to be mindful of. Force of Nature Savage Roar is such a prime example, by the way, of the threat of pressure being, in many situations, more valuable than the actual pressure itself.
Yeah, I think a large portion of the reason why he played Sylvanas last turn instead of a Druid of the Claw was just to fill up his mana. That, in addition to the fact that he had another 5-drop in his hand, so double 5-drop is really one of the strongest turn 10 plays, basically. And we even saw Firebat at the last Dream Hack. He just played around 10 5-drops in his Druid deck just for that purpose of getting double 5-drop on turn 10 every single turn.
Yep. Well, looks like this is going to end up being a sap.
It could be a sap and a Tinker Sharpsword roll, actually. And I think this, you had the backstab, which would have gotten a really clean kill. But I think this is fair because Sylvanas, now that you've seen Ragnaros be killed, you know that Sylvanas is one of the biggest creatures in RDU's board.
Oh, Sludge Belcher is an excellent draw right now. And that Harrison Jones is going to put that 3/2 dagger in a museum. That's not good news for Lothar because he needed that extra dagger to be there. And again, Sludge Belcher just such an excellent draw to help stave off this pressure. And now this is a board that Lothar is quite concerned with. I would not be surprised to see a Blade Flurry this turn. Yeah,
that just turned the game around. Equipping a dagger with Deadly Poison and not attacking it, he was going really greedy there, where I felt that he didn't necessarily need to be.
All right, so from the looks of things, it's like dagger up, backstab on this Sludge Belcher, drop the Sharp Sword Oil down, run your face into the 3/3, eviscerate off Harrison Jones, and then put your minion in the last one. Oh gosh, you're leaving a 6/2 minion hanging. I think it's something he's going to want to try to avoid. He's seen a swipe at this point too, so something like Violet Teacher, I don't think is too unlikely.
I think something with Tinker Sharpsword Roll is definitely something you can consider as well. If you can something like backstab, dagger up, Tinker Sharpsword Oil, attack into it, Blade Flurry, and then you're left with a 6/3 minion on board, but no dagger. And I think that's still alright because you've seen so many swipes and wraths from your opponent that he might not have a way to clear it.
So there's Eviscerate. I think that's a pretty standard one to expect. And I imagine this is going to end up being backstab and SI7 agent into this Sludge Belcher. So a lot of tokens getting generated now and no swipe on RDU side of the board. But he doesn't have to fear too much stuff going forward. Lothar's getting pretty low on cards. Oh, Dr. Boom gets drawn. Wow, this Innervate is really going to put some big turns on the board.
Yeah, a potentially 14 mana turn for RDU right now. No, that Spectral Knight is actually a neat one. We don't see it often these days because Piloted Shredder has been so common, so people are replacing Spectral Knight for the Sludge Belchers. But Spectral Knight could be a really nice metagame call with the fact that there's pretty much rogues in everyone's lineup.
Yep. Dr. Boom's going to come down here. Violet Teacher gets dealt with Druid of the Claw. And these two 1/1 tokens are not feeling very threatening, and that's got to be one of the worst draws in Lothar's deck right now. And when you're facing down this kind of board, you are definitely worried about just Savage Roar.
Yeah, just Savage Roar indeed. I think this might just have to be a sprint turn and hope to draw into one of your preparations. You've actually already used one at least. Has both preparations been used?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he's only used one. He used one on an Eviscerate, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think with the sprint, you need to draw preparation.
Oh, it's right off the top.
And then you need to go for some really huge play.
I mean, what's available here, though?
Oh, man. I don't see a way that you can cleanly kill this Dr. Boom.
Well, he's gonna sacrifice one of his minions to do it. So 4 goes into Dr. Boom. Your face goes into his face. 1 more damage goes to his face, and then you Blade Flurry.
You hope you don't take too much damage. I think you will, though, and you'll put yourself in Force of Nature Savage Roar range. But if your opponent doesn't have a taunt and he doesn't kill you right away, then you have a potential for lethal with,
this is good.
With the rest of your hands.
That's a great outcome for Lothar right now. And RDU has no taunts available, and he's at 10, and that looks like that's going to be enough for lethal to me.
Yeah, definitely. No Lothar, no taunts, no Savage Roar, no double Savage Roar. And even though the Spectral Knight is a great card, it does not have taunts. So yeah, that's game over. We see again a rogue that just uses the haha into Tinker's Sharpsword Oil into Blade Flurry, and that's game over.
Yep, that Blade Flurry was originally one of the worst draws that he could have had, but this turn it's one of the best cards that he could have drawn. I don't think it really mattered with the Deadly Poison draw after that. It would have been 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, the Deadly Poison would have been enough anyway. But he's going to show a second Blade Flurry, and RDU looks pained from that one. And Lothar's even going to add a little bit extra to it. There's a Blade Flurry. He's like, hey, by the way, I didn't even have to kill you with my pirate. I'm just going to blow up your whole board and you.
Yeah, what a mistake.
Game 2 going to go over to Lothar right now. And he jumps up to a quick 2-0 lead. So a couple of decks left for him, and RDU still got his entire lineup available right now. It's going to be Druid and Mage left for Lothar, and he's got to fight back. Against again, RDU has everything available for him here. He's got Hunter, he's got Mage, he's got Rogue, he's got Druid. What's going to be his best option against Druid Mage with his full lineup?
Wow, Druid Mage. Those are actually two decks that are at somewhat opposite ends of the spectrum. Mage is really aggressive. Druid is really aggressive as well, but it's more of a mid-range deck. So they're looking to have their strengths peak at different points in the game. I would have to say, oh man, maybe you just lead off with Mage of your own and just hope to win the mirror, hope to get a favorable matchup against Druid. I mean, is there anything else RDU can do?
I think Rogue here is a really good choice. Rogue, I think, is going to, again, line up fairly well against Druid, and one of the reasons I think Rogue's been doing so well is because Mech Mage has been so popular. So when you get the early options to fight off what they have, you just get so much of a mid-game advantage with the threat of Blade Flurry that Mage is kind of forced to overdevelop their board and just kind of hope you don't have it. But since you are able to draw so many cards, it doesn't make that much of an impact against him. But if he's just gonna queue up Mage here. So when RDU's queuing up Mage here, I think he feels like he's gonna get favorable trades at some point throughout the mid game. Lothar has been tending to be very, very defensive with his plays, even when he has spots where he can really turn on the aggression. So if he continues to fight in that same trend, RDU may be able to take advantage of that mindset also by being a little bit more aggressive than he typically would. But we're going to have to see how these games pan out. Snow Chugger, I'm not sure, is a super important keep. But he has Mech Warper, so it makes a lot of sense to do it. Spider Tank is also kind of a peculiar keep.
Yeah. I think in this matchup, Mech Mage versus Mech Mage Mirror, even though it is a mirror, RDU is going to have the advantage because, as we know, Lothar is playing at least one Counterspell in his deck. And Counterspell is probably one of the worst secrets you can have against a mech deck that just has a lot of spare parts. If you basically use one spare part to cancel out the Counterspell, it's such a huge swing.
That's something that actually RDU might be accounting for when he chooses a queue up Mage here too, is the fact that sometime 1/3 of the Mad Scientist secrets that Lothar is going to get are not going to actually sway the tempo. It's a really strong start here from RDU. And Lothar's already going to have pressure on him to fight back against this board. We can just see Lothar's like, yeah, I don't know about that. It's looking kind of bad.
Yeah, it's looking especially bad because if Lothar chooses to play the mad scientist here, then the RDU will be able to run his Clockwork Gnome into the mad scientist and get a spare part from that. So if Lothar procs counterspell from that, then RDU will just be able to use a spare part to counter it very effectively.
The other thing too is if he just plays mad scientist here, RDU can just play Spider Tank, run his gnome in, and then 2 to face, and Lothar's sitting on a mirror entity and whatever minion he has next turn, and then he can just proc the mirror entity with basically whatever he wishes, and have Spider Tank run into it favorably.
So this is with this play, again, Spider Tank challenges these 2/3s, and I think Spider Tank is just such a good minion in this matchup because the Mech Mage deck is just a lot of 2/3s, the Snow Chugger and the Mech Warper, and anything that RDU plays or anything that Lothar plays will get challenged very effectively by the 3/4 Spider Tank.
Do you think he kept Spider Tank just because his curve was so good in the opener? Like, if his curve wasn't as strong as it was, do you think he would have mulliganed it and searched for something that made it stronger?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think the fact that you have a Mech Warper as well definitely accounts into that. Mech Warper into Spider Tank is one of the best curves you can get.
Yeah,
like Spider Tank on turn 2, it's so good because it again challenges everything that Lothar can play on turn 2.
He's going to Spider Tank of his own. So Mad Scientist getting kind of stranded in hand here, and
he could have done a stronger play on this turn with the Tinkertown Technician, but I think with what he's saying with the Spider Tank play instead is that he really wants to activate the Goblin Blast Mage on turn 4.
Yep. I'm actually not sure how much value it's going to get here either.
Yeah, normally Goblin Blast Mage is the strongest minion or one of the strongest minion for costs in the Mech Mage deck, but right now, I mean, what can the Blast Mage really hit?
Well, it can go.
It can kill the Mech Warper, but after that, like, the best case scenario, I guess, is...
Oh, this is easy. You go 1 to Mech Warper, 3 to Snow Chugger. Wow.
Oh, I guess that was all right.
Come on, Lothar. You got to aim better than that.
Got to aim perfectly.
He wanted another hit on one of these Spider Tanks, too, so he could run his Spider Tank. And instead, he's forced to freeze his Spider Tank for 2 turns. Wow, RDU draws Goblin Blast Mage. This could potentially be some major swings here.
If the Blast Mage kills the Spider Tank, yeah, it would definitely be a swing.
I think he's supposed to go for Fireball first. I like Fireballing here, and then 6 damage to face. Lothar's Spider Tank's frozen for another turn, and then on turn 5, you have Goblin Blast Mage, freeze whichever minion it doesn't kill, and hope that it picks off this Spider Tank or something in the meantime. Draws Counterspell, which has got to be one of the worst draws in his deck right now.
Yeah, it's just completely dead when there is an emergency coolant in RDU's hand. So Lothar will have to rely on every other one of his cards right now. Cogmaster and Pilot Sky Golem just lets him play on curve, but he's going to be playing from behind for the rest of the game. He's both behind on board and in life.
He's way behind in life. Mm-hmm. He's actually further ahead. He's older than RDU. Wait, is being older than someone, is that being ahead or being behind in life? How does that work? I feel like there's got to be like a curve to it. Like you hit a certain edge and you're way ahead of everyone in life, but then like, you know, I don't know, what's the age limit where you're like, God, I'm so far behind now when you've like surpassed a certain point?
I don't know. That's kind of like a depressing thought, isn't it? Like you peak at a certain point in your life.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
So he picks off, oh, Trog's no stupid, by the way. He picks off a piloted Shredder, but he doesn't pick off Cogmaster from this, and just going to continue to put heavy pressure and develop his board. Lothar looks a little bit stressed from that one.
RDU looks very happy from that.
I mean, how could you not be happy from that? You just got 2 major favorable trades. This emergency coolant, I think, is going to be held on to for this Archmage Antonitis. Wait, does Archmage Antonitis, does it trigger if the coolant gets counterspelled?
I've never been in that situation before, just because I've never been counterspelled before when I've Antonitis on field. Counterspell is just not a card anyone plays in the metagame these days.
I'd like to see Lothar ping and take out this Goblin Blast Mage here with this Cogmaster. I think that's about the best value this card's going to get. It also maximizes your damage. You don't overkill anything. And you take some 1-health minions off the board, but if you can continuously weave in hero powers at every turn of the game, it's really not that big of a deal. So he's going to choose to just pull the most power off the board that he can. And this is okay too. Like, this isn't like a deficient play by any means, because he still ends up a little bit favorable, and RDU actually doesn't have a way to proc a potential mirror entity here. He's only got Dr. Boom and Archmage Antonidas, so this could be a bit of trouble from him. Oh, but he gets a second emergency coolant. So freezing here is going to save RDU from having to proc a mirror entity with either a Dr. Boom or an Archmage Antonidas on turn 7. And Lothar, oh, he's got to feel bad about this hand.
This is almost over, to be honest. Like, Lothar basically has to bluff a mirror entity here, but I think RDU is actually just going to be all right with playing Dr. Boom, even if his opponent gets potentially gets a Dr. Boom himself.
I think so as well. Oh, he's going to go for emergency coolant here. He's going to find out that it's counterspell. I don't know. I wouldn't be too happy about that, RDU. I think he.
Well, yeah, he is pretty happy.
Oh, he's at 6. I'm so stupid. I wasn't even looking at life totals. I was just looking at the board. I'm so blinded by the fact that RDU's hand was so good and that Lothar's hand was so ugly. It was just, that was such a one-sided game from like the onset. It's like everything went wrong for, like everything that could go wrong went wrong for Lothar, and everything that could go right went right for RDU. But I think a lot of that had to be with the fact that he was mindful enough to keep that spider tank in his opening hand. Actually, after seeing, when he drew the Clockwork Gnome with it as well, so he had turn 1 Mech Warper Clockwork Gnome into spider tank, that's just like, that's such a strong start. That's like super innervate.
Yeah, it's not only that he got the Mech Warper, but he got the exact minion, the Spider Tank, which he smartly kept in his opening hand, that contested everything on the opposing side of the board. So the Mech Warper, great just overall, but the Mech Warper combined with the Spider Tank is almost just a shutout.
Yep, I agree with that. Just such favorable trading the entire step of the way. You dictate the entire pace of the game. So if your opponent's draw isn't on point at every single step, you just run away with it. And that's exactly what ended up happening in that one.
RDU has a point on the board right now, but I think he's okay with losing his Mech Mage deck, but Lothar will still have his Mech Mage deck, and I feel like that's a deck that Lothar will definitely be able to take at least one game with.
Yeah, I think when you lose with Mech Mage, I think the best class to lose to with Mech Mage is probably an opposing Mech Mage, because it means you still have yours and your opponent doesn't really have theirs anymore. And they didn't pick off like a super favorable matchup with their Mech Mage, and I think that's sort of what Conquest, it looks to me like that's a really good strategy moving forward, is trying to not get your decks picked off by your opponent's best matchups with their decks, because it means that it throws off one more step of everything that's going forward. So when you're losing in the even matchups, that's the spot, if you're going to have to lose, that you would prefer to lose in, rather than the very lopsided ones, I think.
Mm-hmm. In the 4th match of the series, we're actually going to see Hunter versus Mage. We saw this matchup previously where Lothar played Hunter and RDU played Mage, but this matchup is actually going to be a bit different because RDU is running more of a mid-range Hunter, more of a defensive Hunter, so it probably won't be over as quickly as the previous Hunter versus Mage matchup, but RDU still has the Knife Juggler in his opening hand, and if he draws Unleash the Hounds, then he might have the same comeback potential that Lothar had in his game when he played Hunter.
Yep. Game 4 underway. Just like you said, he's playing a mid-range Hunter. So we saw this yesterday. He's got 2 copies of Savannah Highman. He's got a Dr. Boom. He's got a Ragnaros. He had Sludge Belcher in here as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sludge Belcher, he actually had in his opening hand, but he threw that card away.
Yeah, so very, very oriented in taking control of the mid-game. I'm curious how this lines up versus Mech Mage, because I know that Face Hunter does really well against Mech Mage just because it's got so much aggression, and when you couple that by being backed up with Explosive Trap, it becomes very difficult for your opponent to actually race what's happening. But RDU's got Freezing Traps, and these are easily procced by minions that have already done some work, by Clockmasters, by Clockwork Gnomes, and that sort of thing. I'm curious how very different these games are going to end up getting played as a result of that.
Yeah, it's actually very curious because in most games, against most decks, you prefer the Freezing Traps for tempo plays, but against more aggressive decks, you actually like the Explosive Traps. And again, against more defensive decks, the Explosive Traps in Face Hunter are used usually for the extra damage, but against Mech Mage, it's actually just perfect to control the board as well.
Piece of Sergeant gets drawn. It's not a fantastic one when you're staring down a 2/3 or a Mage Hero Power.
Yeah, the Abusive Sergeant really requires the Haunted Creeper to be on board, because otherwise, against such an aggressive deck like Mech Mage, you're going to be really hard-pressed to buff anything on the board, because you're almost always not going to have board control.
Yeah, so RDU is going to choose to play Abusive Sergeant here, and what he's hoping for is that he gets a hero power out of his opponent. He doesn't want his opponent to be developing a 4-drop in this position. He wants to disrupt his turn, so Is Lothar going to fall for this bait here?
I think you're curving out so well that you have to actually just play something. I mean, even if you play like the Mad Scientist, I think it's still superior to pinging, because essentially the Abusive Sergeant will probably trade for the Mad Scientist anyway. He's also thinking between curving out with the Mechanical Yeti or the Piloted Shredder.
Yeah.
The Pilot Shredder is slightly weaker to another Abusive Sergeant or an Eagle Horde Mo, but the Mechanical Yeti was slightly weaker to something like a Beast plus Kill Command or just a Hunter's Mark.
Yeah.
I think with this play, with the Pilot Shredder play, he's less vulnerable to being blown out by something like a Hunter's Mark.
Yeah.
Though.
So RDU is about to fall very far behind on board. He's actually got no turn 5 action, and his hand is Ragnaros 8 Savannah Highmane. So if he gets to the turn 6 through 8 point, I think he's got a chance to win this game. But when you look at Lothar's hand, he's got so much action coupled with tempo plays that I don't know if RDU can actually get back into this one.
Well, that being said, Unleash the Hounds is drawn, and that is the basically the comeback combo for Hunter. You have the Knife Juggler Unleash, but unfortunately, RDU's done such a good job of controlling the board on turns 1 through 4 that it's not a value Unleash anymore.
Yeah, Lothar throws on the well played when he sees a blank turn 5, and this is, I mean, I imagine this is just going to be Mechanical Yeti and Cogmaster, but he does have to consider the impact that something like Knife Juggler is going to have. So he's going to go with Snow Chugger instead. And I'm curious why he chose to go with Snow Chugger over Mechanical Yeti.
I guess this shuts out out weapons a bit more.
Is he just trying to like freeze Savannah Highmane with an attack and move forward?
I think in this type of matchup, you can actually just ignore Savannah Highmane and race your opponent. There's just so much damage on the board right now. Plus, you have a Fireball and a Goblin Blast Mage.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking as well. Like, this is just, I feel like for mid-range Hunter, they just get out-tempoed, basically, because Mech Mage's minions are just more efficient, and then when you couple that with a burn, you don't actually really get to see value out of these late-game cards that you typically would see.
It looks like there could just be possibly a ping to face right now. There's just so much damage on board that even a strong power play like Knife Juggler Unleash the Hounds won't be able to deal with it. Although I will say that the Knife Juggler will get even extra hits from the Savannah Highmane dying and the Hyena summoning.
It's going to be a ping here, and this is about as close to the comeback turn as you can get. He's cracking his knuckles. He's like, all right, Unleash the Hounds, do work.
All right, let's see what I can get off of this. There's going to be 7 knives thrown this turn.
That's it.
All right, we're just going to watch these knives go off.
Not bad. I mean, he gets a shot on every single one of these. So I imagine the Savannah Highmane is going to be running into the Snow Chugger right after a couple of these hounds go in.
Yep, that looks good. And more juggles even. Juggle 6, juggle 7.
That's about as good of a turn as I think you could have possibly hoped for RDU. Every single juggle hits a minion. Nothing overkills anything other than the Savannah Highmane, which overkilled. And now RDU's got a board, but Lothar's got 9 points of damage. Oh, jeez. That is a huge draw from Lothar right now. He's got 15 points of direct damage.
I guess the only question now is how scared is Lothar of dying to this board?
I don't think he's scared at all. And RDU gets fireballed to the face, and you can just see him. He's already upset about it. I don't think there's a combination of cards that Lothar actually dies to here.
Well, you have to think there could be 2. Well, there's not even 2 kill commands because 1 kill command has already been used.
Yeah, so if there's 2 Timberwolves played.
Okay, we're going with Timberwolves.
I'm trying to think of just combinations of Hunter cards that Lothar could actually lose to right now. Yeah, he's going to go with the ping just to hedge his bets against every single thing available. He's got 9 points, 10 points next turn in potential damage. And yeah, I think that's just it. He's even got counterspell for the Animal Companion. And wow, Lothar's going to jump out to a 3-1 lead now. This mid-range Hunter not getting the job done versus Mech Mage. Its aggression is no match for the burn from Lothar. Second fireball to face. And a hero power. So RDU just cringing and clutching his head. Wow. What a game of Lothar. Just loses complete control of the board. on turn 7 and is able to shut it out anyway with one single draw.
Yeah. Now, who could have thought that at this point in a tournament with Strifecrow, Firebat, Kalento, Savitz, that Lothar would be so close to the grand finals of the tournament? Lothar, he hasn't had the best success lately, ever since his qualification to IEM, the first IEM Katowice, where he qualified as the Polish representative. Lothar hasn't been getting the best results, but after joining Nylum and becoming its manager, becoming one of its star players, he's looking pretty good right now. And he might even get to the finals of his first tournament.
Yeah, I mean, when you draw well and you play well, that's the winning combination. That's really where everything's at. He hasn't had to have like too much actual on-card RNG have to go his way. It just really hasn't been that sort of situation. It's really just been the draws being powerful from Lothar and him playing him well. I mean, when you draw power, that's how you win tournaments, is you draw powerful. That's why you have to play good decks to do it. You can't just build your own brews that are unrefined, go into an event and crush everyone because you play better than them. I mean, half the play in this game is choosing the right decks.
And now Lothar is up 3-1, and his remaining deck, I believe, is actually Druid. And with Druid remaining, I think Lothar feels very comfortable because it's very rare for Druid to draw to lose 3 games in a row. In order to lose 3 games in a row, you pretty much have to draw poorly 3 games in a row, and that's just something that Druid doesn't do very often.
Now, when you consider how much redundancy it actually has between 2 Wild Growths and 2 Innervates, I mean, that's 4 copies of card. If you mulligan specifically for these cards, you draw them at an extremely high percentage of the time. This is why this deck has so much success. And he doesn't have him in his opening hand here, but he is going second, so he has additional chances. This Hunter deck is going to match up a lot better versus this Druid deck, though. With you couple freezing traps, as well as all the pressure that RDU is going to apply. This hand, to me, looks very fantastic from RDU. I'd be surprised if any of these cards got mulliganed.
RDU still has to be thinking that he still wants the freezing traps to come out of the Mad Scientist. So even though freezing trap is probably stronger against Druid than any other class, freezing trap still might go back into the deck because the Mad Scientist into freezing trap play is just so much stronger.
It's definitely stronger, but think about like the average replacement you're going to get right now if you mulligan this freezing trap. I don't think that an average card in your deck right now, considering that you're looking to go turn 3 Animal Companion and turn 4 Houndmaster it, is going to be stronger than a freezing trap to back that up.
Yeah, that's very fair. Just a lot of schools of thought, and I think both lines are very relevant and very acceptable.
Yeah, you can see RDU's pained over it because, frankly, freezing trap on turn 2 is not like an exciting play. It's not an amazing combination of cards, but I'd like to see him keep it anyway just because of the potential blowouts it can lead to if you get turn 2 freezing trap, Animal Companion, and Houndmaster, and say your opponent's opening is an explosive Innervate draw, and they don't have a way to fight it back against the trap. Oh, and he gets a Mad Scientist too. Wow, so an even better start now. So the last card he wants to see in his deck, he wants card number 30 to be his second Mad Scientist.
Also card number 29 to be a second freezing trap.
Yeah, if he draws it, freezing trap and Mad Scientist are the 2 worst draws in his deck right now. So we're going to be looking to avoid those.
All right, is this freezing trap? No.
I think it's pretty beneficial for him that it's not freezing trap. Huffer gets 66.66% repeating, of course. Percent chance of making a Huffer. Just little Leroy Jenkins.
Unfortunately, Huffer is the worst Animal Companion for RD right now. And now Lothar will be able to trade.
I don't know. I actually don't think it's that bad. I mean, you got in 4 points of damage. You're going to pull a Shade out of contention right away. I think this is okay. Because now, on his turn 4, like this Mad Scientist is basically going uncontested. So this is going to look to pick up like 4 to 6 points of damage. He doesn't have to actually sacrifice this for anything.
I still feel though, because any other Mad Scientist would have guaranteed that any other Animal Companion would have guaranteed the Animal Companion would have survived. Now RDU is looking at a fairly bad turn on turn 4. He can't really play the freezing trap because, I guess if he plays the freezing trap right here, then I guess he's running more than one secret. Or more than one type of secret.
I don't really think it's the case. I think it's just that Mad Scientist now has turned into... I mean, Mad Scientist has gotten 5 points of damage now. And it's going to look to get a 7 points of damage. For 2 mana, 7 points of damage is a totally fine deal, even if you don't get extra value from it. So what he's really hunting for isn't for extra value from his cards. He's just looking for enough. And enough is kind of the situation I think that he's really gunning for and trying to grab a hold of. Sludge Belcher. I think that Web Spinner is going to be a little bit better than Sludge Belcher right now because he just wants to get extra power on the board.
Yeah, right now, RDU is looking to protect this Mad Scientist. If he can somehow let his opponent proc this Freezing Trap and still get Mad Scientist off after that, he's going to be in such a great position.
Force of Nature is an excellent draw this turn. I'd be a little bit surprised if he didn't use Force of Nature right here. This is going to proc the Freezing Trap. This is going to kill off Web Spinner. It's going to kill off Houndmaster. Like, this is exactly where it wants to be. And he even has a tree left in his hand now to counter the next Freezing Trap. So basically all freezes have been checked right now from RDU. This spot is looking dire straits for Lothar all of a sudden. And I'd like to see him kill the Houndmaster here instead of kill the Mad Scientist. Give your opponent one extra chance to draw a Freezing Trap. Job done.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Manixia is actually drawn from RDU from the Web Spinner, and that might actually be fairly relevant because Druid can't really deal 8 damage effectively.
Yeah, that's true. Lothar chose to check the other Freezing Trap right away. So that's also an acceptable play. But now these 2 trees in his hand basically are just they're gonna be lost.
Wait a minute. Okay, I see. So Manixia comes down, but it's not a very threatening minion to put on the board. Before, RDU was fairly aggressive with his plays, just going for face all the time because his hand dictated it. He had the Glaive Zuka and he had a lot of early game war control, but now we're kind of seeing the opposite happen. The 2 attack from Nixia, just not that great.
It is going to start getting in damage though, and again, with this other kill command in his hand, now he's got 2 Unleash the Hounds. I think this is just very close to enough stuff that he needs going on. My accent is going to threaten any taunts that come down. It's going to start getting in 2 damage a turn, and again, Lothar doesn't have an efficient way to clear an 8 health minion, so this is just going to be repetitive damage until this is dealt with. I don't know.
Harrison Jones, it looks all right, but if you play Harrison Jones, you're not going to be able to remove much from the board.
This is a tough spot. No Scenarios play. No Treants really doing anything. This is just tough. I think he just needs options.
Yeah, I guess Harrison Jones, you have to hope to draw Innervate.
Oh,
there we go.
Wow, a perfect draw from Lothar. He's going to be able to get Sludge Belcher on the board as well.
Sludge Belcher will get checked by the Anixia, but by the Manixia, but at least you get a slime out of it, so it's a pretty decent deal. And if the Manixia runs into the Sludge Belcher, you have to hope that on the next turn you can get a value swipe.
I've seen a lot of Defias ringleaders get summoned.
Yeah.
Defias Shredders lately. So going to go ahead and use a Treant here. Doesn't want to take 3 damage. And just going to keep the board clean here. So he's actually not going to Sludge Belcher, which I'm a little bit surprised by because he would have had Swipe to follow that up. So pretty good turns it would have been. And now these Unleash the Hounds. I mean, this is about the best Unleash the Hounds turns I think you're going to get, as well as Eagle Horn Bow. Is RDU thinking about Force of Nature Savage Roar? Let's take that into account right now. So that would be 14 plus 5, 17, 20 plus, it'd be 26 damage. And then if you had Innervate and a Hero Power, it's only 27 damage. So he's actually even out of range of full combo right now. And Lothar, you could see his reaction to this Eagle Horn Bow. I think he knows that this game is all but done at this point. Wow, he actually runs my X-Men into Harrison Jones here. He's trading down the board. What's going on?
Yeah, I think this is all right because you put your opponent down to 9 HP and you know you have an Unleash the Hounds, which is an activator for kill command on your next turn. So at the very least, you're going to get 7 damage in, and that's if your opponent doesn't put up a taunt.
Wrath's going to go ahead and take out That's my X now. Sludge Belcher's going to come down. I think this is just about it, though. Between hero powers, I think it's just going to be enough. I really would have liked to see this damage go to face from RDU. He really didn't have anything he had to play around.
Leok, not that great.
And I think he needs to save Unleash the Hounds for kill command now. So now he's just praying that Lothar doesn't draw a heal.
This is another one of those really tense games where Lothar just basically needs that one card, that heal, in order to kind of... I guess it doesn't even lock RDU out of the game because RDU still, like, we know his deck has a lot of big threats. So even if Lothar is able to heal, then cards like Dr. Boob and Ragnaros can even bring RDU back into the game again.
I'm looking for just pressure now. I really think that he misstepped by not putting that damage to face. He had nothing to worry about. Even double Savage Roar wouldn't have been enough to kill him on that turn. And Force Nature Savage Roar wasn't enough damage to kill him on that turn. I mean, now Lothar just has like a pretty decent chance to actually climb back into this.
He can get rid of this Leok and put up a taunt up. And if you do that, I think you also innervate out a hero power just to first weave the hero power in and also to prevent a potential lethal from Ragnaros.
You know, he can just taunt up and play Big Game Hunter and put 1 point of damage into face. And then he's looking at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then he's looking at potentially 16 points of damage after that. So he's just not close enough to being able to get the damage on board to actually kill his opponent. He doesn't actually have any pieces of combo, so he's just going to go swipe and charge. I actually like the charge here.
Yeah.
He needs to get some damage in.
Now that I think of it, I like the charge, but again, with this play, I like the innervate hero power as well.
I like innervate Big Game Hunter. I think he should have gotten on the board. Savannah Highmane is an excellent draw right now.
Now with the Savannah Highmane, I have to think that Savannah Highmane is coming down on this board. If you don't, then you just left with a kill command, and you really want to activate this kill command. I also think that kill command is probably coming down too, but the question is, do you feel safe? And I guess he doesn't. He needs to clear the board.
Yeah, going favor and clear here anyway. Dr. Boom gets drawn, and I got to believe this is going to be Cenarius and a couple taunts behind this. Lothar's saving onto his Big Game Hunter because he's seen Ragnaros from this Hunter deck, so he knows there's a potential that that's always going to come into play. I got to believe that's why that was held on to. 2 taunts going to get made, and now pressure is on RDU. You can see him almost recoil in horror at the thought of having to attack through 2 more trees to get the job done.
Lothar is once again considering innervating out something. And again, I really like either your play of innervating out a Big Game Hunter or innervating out the hero power. The Big Game Hunter just puts more pressure to the board and threatens lethal more. Innervating a hero power, it prevents you from dying to Ragnaros. And I don't believe you're going to use this innervate later on in the game anyway if you don't use it on this turn.
If he plays Big Game Hunter, he's got 16 damage next turn. So this turn, I think it makes a little bit less sense to play it than it did before, but I still think Innervate Hero Power is going to be better than not Innervating Hero Power, again, just because what you mentioned, there's just not too much going on. So it's going to be Big Game Hunter. I still would have liked to see this turn earlier for the added pressure. Harrison Jones is not going to do anything. RDU is not quite dead yet, though. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16 damage from Lothar available. So RDU does have a little bit of time left to find something, unless Lothar draws something like Swipe, and he's going to close this series out now. 4-1 versus RDU. I have to believe there was missteps in not putting more damage to the face earlier on and favoring defensive play. Wow, what a series. Lothar is on fire this tournament, and he is primed in what looks like potentially his first big championship.